Hey, Sally, thank you for coming in. You're leading such a great program at Health of Life Sciences, Microsoft for Startups, and you got a great history of contribution. So I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your insights with my audience.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's really nice to talk to you again.
But so, Sally, one of the questions that my audience is always curious about, and I should tell you, I actually track who my audience is, and it's in this order. It's actually co-founders, CEOs, founders, board directors, presidents, managing directors of funds and things like that. Then I get into professors and experts. And so it's always these executives that are at the top. But they're always curious. You got this great background of doing contribution and involved with startups and Internet of Things, like the leading innovations and so on. What were those inflection points that were like magic moments in your life, maybe two or three? And it could have been when you were 3 years old or 10 or what, inside of school, outside of school, could have been something in your career, in a family member or some mentor that created this marvelous career that you have of contribution.
Well, I think the first inflection point goes back to when I was in high school, and I was very fashion conscious and wanted to go into fashion merchandising. And my father suggested that I take a high school class in computer science. And this was way, way, way before we had what we have today. And so having a computer science class in high school was pretty rare. And I took the class and I actually fell in love with the technology and what it was able to do. And it really changed the focus for me from away from kind of fashion. And, I thought I'd go to FIT in New York and all of this to one of technology. And so when I went to undergraduate, I ended up studying computer science as a minor and then studying marketing and business as my major. So that was probably inflection point one. Inflection point two was when I started working for a Microsoft partner in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, that really got me into the Microsoft ecosystem in a way that I had not participated in previously. And I got to know the partner programs and how the Microsoft ecosystems worked. And then I stayed there for 16 years. It was a great run. They were a startup when I joined, so I've been through that journey. But then I joined Microsoft in 2015 and really got an understanding of what is capable, what's possible when you're in this kind of big machine, this big enterprise with all of these tentacles throughout various parts of business and science and technology. And after a couple of years, probably the next inflection point happened when I was hired within Microsoft to be an IoT global black belt focusing on healthcare. And I'd been doing IoT for a while and I loved it. I had even been doing it at the previous company, at the Microsoft partner, and thought it was really cool when I applied it to manufacturing. But this opened my eyes to the promise and the value of real-time data for patients, real-time data for medical devices, fleet management of medical devices, secure supply chain for pharmaceutical and other key items. And so my passion for IoT, while it didn't wane, I now spun up this other passion for healthcare. And having no real healthcare background, I immersed myself dramatically in reading as much as I could read. To this day, I spend probably about an hour a day with bespoke news feeds that are fed to me on everything from healthcare startups to healthcare VCs to healthcare and AI. And I spend about an hour a day still learning and reading. And I think that's one of the things that inspires me most about healthcare is that we're never done. There's always more to learn, always more envelopes to push. And so it's really become much more of a heartfelt mission to not only do this type of work, but to do it because we can do well by doing good. One of the things that inspires me most is talking to founders of healthcare startups. In most cases, they have a personal story, whether it's them or a loved one, themselves or a loved one, that have had some kind of significant healthcare event, and they have to see change. They cannot relinquish that desire to change things for the better. And so the combination of my own passions and surrounding myself with people who are so driven is really what inspires me every day and makes me love the work I do.
That's really, really fascinating. So you have this interest and passion in fashion, and yet you're encouraged to study computing science, or you end up with a Bachelor of Science in Marketing and Computing Science as a minor at Virginia Tech. And then you get a master's in systems management from the University of Southern California and an MBA from George Washington University. So it's a pretty diverse kind of background. You end up working with a Microsoft partner for a long time, from a startup to where they become a like an enterprise. So you see that entire startup journey, and then you enter into this really remarkable company that's been around and is a leader across so many different dimensions, right? Including now in AI. And you get involved with healthcare, and you can see all of these elements of healthcare, but you have this Internet of Things background. You can see the application of the Internet of Things and sensors and how that coming together can give you personalized medicine and precision medicine. You can get population health and sort of the universal applications of healthcare, but you have the startup background as well. So can you talk about the startup journey and the fact that you're involved in the startup ecosystem of Microsoft, and what does that mean?
Sure. And just I've had two businesses of my own as well. One was a consulting company way back in the day when I was a defense contractor, and then the other one was a yoga studio. So not quite, it's healthcare adjacent, but yeah. So I've been through those journeys as well. But I think when it comes to the startup program at Microsoft, one of our goals obviously is to help early stage companies grow and scale using our technology. And we have really designed a program that is designed to help startups from ideation all the way through to exit. And at each stage of your journey, more additional resources are available to you to help you in building your solution, which is all the stuff that people expect, all the Azure services and all of that, but also to build your company. So things like Office 365 and Teams and LinkedIn and Power Platform, Power BI, Dynamic CRM. So it's really a very unique combination of fostering this development of the business in a holistic kind of way, both the solution and the business itself. And then we also have a program called Pegasus, and that is designed to identify and then do deep go-to-market and technical work with a small subset that we feel are future market makers and unicorns. So in health and life sciences, we have about 25 of those companies, and we invite them to participate with us at industry events like HIMSS and Health. We do special webinars featuring them and articles and case studies. But we really are focused on trying to identify those that we think are high potential and then helping build their company with them and accelerate the solution growth.
I mean, that's really, really practical in terms of how a startup or an entrepreneur can get access to resources and advice and help and so on. Are there particular sort of sites they can go to? Let's say I'm an entrepreneur and I'm really interested in healthcare, and maybe I'm even a researcher, but I'm a translational researcher, which means I've got a great idea, but I actually want to translate that into a solution, and I'm even maybe got a prototype, and I'm thinking, I need help. I don't know what to do as a startup. What particular website can they go to, and what's that onboarding process like?
Sure. So the program, you can log on and apply for the program at startups.microsoft.com. And actually, once you join the program, we have one of the features is obviously we have Azure specialists that can help you build the solution, everything. And I think people expect that from us. But we also have something called the Expert Network, and that is designed to help startups through different areas. So we have a bunch of Microsoft people who have signed up to be experts, and they act as mentors in a very scaled way to startups who are interested in talking to them. So let's say that you've had a product discussion with one of our Azure advisors, but then you want to understand how it's being used in healthcare or retail, or go into business use cases. Well, you can probably find someone in the expert network to help you through that discussion. And so we're really trying to build something that scales across the tens of thousands of startups that are in the program. And again, we have a YouTube channel that has all the onboarding links on how to kind of get started with Founders Hub. And we offer training and all kinds of virtual events to make sure that people are getting the most out of the program. But it all starts at startups.microsoft.com.
Okay, so that's a great landing point to an entry point as well. So you're telling me that there's access to all sorts of technology advice, but even access to Microsoft Cloud capability through Azure and Azure OpenAI and Azure AI and so on. And are there like non-dilutive grants that are available once you qualify?
No, we don't do that. What we do is we give a bunch of cloud credits from 1,000 at ID8, which is the lowest level, all the way up to 150,000 for those that are in level 4, which is kind of what we call scale. So, and then there are more credits for those in Pegasus. So the idea is that we don't give grants, but we give you a bunch of resources. We also give you things like subscriptions to LinkedIn, subscriptions to Bubble, Miro. Azure, not only can you use Azure OpenAI, but we also have credits for OpenAI as well. So there's a plethora of things that you can use through Founders Hub. And we're constantly adding new offers to make sure that we remain relevant and valuable for the startups in our program.
So it sounds like a great one-stop source for training and advice, and you can get these Azure credits and so on. But let's say I'm a corporation and I've got an innovation center where we're doing startups. Am I too big to join this thing, or can I join it as well?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I get it a lot because people are constantly innovating within their own organizations. And so typically what we think about is, and we've got a few examples of which I'll share with you, but typically if you've got kind of a kernel of IP, you can join the Microsoft for Startups program once you spin it out as a separate company. For example, we've got one startup in Pegasus called Beekeeper AI, and they were part of UCSF here in the US, and they had this IP, and I was in touch with them when they were still part of UCSF, and I said, when you spin out and you're a separate company, then you'll join Microsoft for Startups. We monitored them, and then at one point we realized that they were Pegasus material and recruited them into Pegasus. But that's typically how it happens. And we've got relationships with other academic medical centers as well as some accelerators who are eager to have their cohorts participate in Microsoft for Startups.
So now I've got an idea. There's this thing I'm involved with called AI for Good, and we have an innovation factory, which is like an open platform. Would you then encourage those who are like finalists in that program and say, hey, why not apply to this startup program within Microsoft?
Yes, absolutely. But you don't have to wait. I mean, literally you and your brother could be sitting at the kitchen table with an idea and log on and get into the program. So I always think in terms of don't wait, but start earlier rather than later, because you'll have access to a bunch of resources that could actually change the trajectory of what you're thinking about, whether it's talking to someone within Microsoft who may have a perspective that's different from yours, or it's knowing about our Azure Health Data Services where you thought you were going to have to build a Fire server or an integration point. You go, oh, I can just use this. So I really encourage folks to get involved earlier rather than later, because there is so much that could change the strategy and the company that you're building.
Well, that sounds really exciting. I mean, I got this invite to be a part of the scaling program for startups for the World Innovation Technology Systems Alliance, which is a federation or an association of industry associations, right? So, like NASCOM is the India member. Well, I'm definitely going to point them to what you're doing because I think it's such a great fit. Or the Innovation Factory at AI for Good, or I'm thinking the World Food Program, the Innovation Accelerator. And I'm part of like ACM and IEEE, and IEEE has a formal entrepreneurship program. So why not point them to this amazing hub that you created, right? Because it's like one-stop place where you can get everything.
Right. And I lead health and life sciences, and that's where I spend my time. But the program runs across all industries. Everything from manufacturing to retail to horizontals like AI, cybersecurity, and data integration. So there is no well, there are a few industries we don't participate in. Obviously, we're looking for ISVs, so we want solutions, not services companies.
There's a lot of excitement with Microsoft Copilot. I can see the scaling and universally because it's so useful, right? It's
Yes.
very practical. It's interesting. I mean, I've been involved with AI since like the 70s. And in fact, I embedded it into something I did for Atomic Energy Canada radiopharmaceutical division back in 1986. So I've been a long time kind of advocate and you saw the ups and downs, and now there's a lot of excitement because you can see it, you can touch it, use it. And in fact, in my keynote last week in Geneva at this YPO Future X event, I actually started with this Suno AI, which is part of Microsoft Copilot. You can get access to the song generator. People are going, that's incredible, right? And okay, so on generative AI, Microsoft is a leader. I would say you're definitely number one in the world in the use of AI. Where do you see that going in 1 to 2 years? So, what are the things that you think that this could be used for, and all of the positive opportunities they are? And then are there tools within Microsoft to address sort of the responsible use as well?
Yeah, so big question, Stephen. So I'll see if I can approach it one part at a time. So as far as use cases, I see a future. I hearken this time to when the internet came up, and people were going, "Oh my gosh, people are going to lose their jobs, and it's going to ruin everything." And it's like, no, we actually learned how to use it as a really helpful tool to accelerate the work that we're already doing. And I see Copilot as being very much the same. When we look back on this time, I think Copilot, in 2 years, Copilot will just be something that everybody uses and will not be a thing. It will just be, a tool. And so, and in healthcare and life sciences specifically, all the Copilot and all the generative AI usage has to be risk driven. So right now we're working on administrative tasks and administrative workflows because theoretically they're low risk. I mean, if a pre-authorization letter doesn't get to the right place at the right time or has a small typo, the risk of that is fairly low. But if you're making clinical decisions based on generative AI, the risk is very high. So I think we're going to stay, at least in healthcare life sciences, in the administrative area for a bit. I don't know how long, I would say for a couple of years, before we feel confident and before we have the guardrails to make sure that if we're using it for clinical decision making, it's explainable, it's responsible, it's ethical, and all of that. Now, as far as the ethical use and responsible use, in March 11th of this year at HIMSS, we announced TRAIN, which is the Trustworthy Responsible AI Network. And we've got a growing list of providers and organizations that are participating in that. So as a consortium, we can understand and plan how to use AI and generative AI using all of those, attributes, ethical, trustworthy, responsible, explainable, all of those things. And while, we're all in on Train because we started that, there are other organizations, there's Chai, there's a whole bunch of folks, AMA. I mean, everyone's trying to figure this out. And so I think it will come in fits and starts. We'll find use cases and go, okay, this is approved, or we're now doing content moderation so we understand where the data is coming from when we get a prompt, and engineer that prompt properly to get the right information. So there's a lot yet to be discovered and to unfold, but I think both as technologists, I think policymakers, I think regulatory leaders, and the industry ecosystem is now keenly aware of both the value and some of the pitfalls, and have a keen desire to work together to make sure that as we apply it, it's used in the proper way, with a proper format, with the proper release of information, so it does remain used for the right purposes and not nefarious purposes.
Yeah, and it's really the responsible, thoughtful way of proceeding forward, right? So you try to make use of the opportunities, but also be mindful as well and thoughtful in this process.
Yes, and always human in the loop. I don't think we'll ever get to complete autonomous. I think there'll always have to be a human in the loop. But you think about a radiologist or another doctor who's looking at a chart. I mean, we've all looked at our own charts and they're a mess. But if you've got something that's summarizing it for you, and then you can go back and look at the citation where that diagnosis came from and go, oh yeah, here are the labs that confirm that. That's a lot faster than having a clinician look through it on their own.
Yeah, it's about optimization and saving time, and there's efficiencies, but as you mentioned, it's human-centered as well. In fact, I was involved with an entire day where there's a UN event where we talk about human-centered AI, but also taking advantage of the opportunities that it enables, right? Including with addressing the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So yeah. I think it's just a marvelous time that we're at. Now, I'm going to go a little bit more futuristic, where we have quantum computing or quantum-inspired algorithms, and then we have supercomputers, right? They go on exascale. They can do a billion operations per second, or quintillion. They're quintillion operations.
Going to run out of numbers.
Yeah, like mind-blowing, right? And I believe we're going to hit zettascale. Do you see then this kind of convergence in the next few years of quantum-inspired quantum with supercomputing and AI, machine learning, in sort of one service? And what are the implications of that in terms of opportunities, especially in healthcare?
Yeah, so I am not an expert in quantum computing, I will tell you. But I do think the healthcare, as you know, generates more data than any other industry on a daily basis. And so as we look to the future and we look at the combination of having many more data points and many more ways to interpret that data, we also not only want to look at kind of these massive data scaling technologies and model technologies, but we also have the opportunity to look at like these small language models that actually can be very specialized and not require the computing power or the data points of a large language model. So I actually see a future in which we continue to build on the massive amounts of data and how we gain the signal from the noise of billions and billions and billions, but also what technologies can we use to really refine what we're looking for in a way that helps us zero in some facets, but also take advantage of the big data sets. And so I think we're looking at kind of two trends simultaneously.
That's really, really fascinating, right? So you can apply all of these kind of large scale resources to unlock the data and the meaning, and even give us more wonderful solutions in a way that's kind of mind-boggling, right? And the opportunities that's going to provide. But there's this whole other aspect of the small ones as well. And in fact, I saw 5.3 got released, right? So, which will work on a phone. And in fact, you can download it, play with it, and so on. And there's a lot of people trying it, and there are tutorials on it. So you can work with it and get used to the sort of smaller implementations of it as well. And I was really fascinated with this Microsoft quantum elements and applying to going over 32, 33 million novel materials for a new kind of battery, where you're combining supercomputing with quantum capability with AI and machine learning. And then I saw this announcement for Quantinium working with Microsoft Research in achieving this 800 times better reliability of the quantum bits, right, into logical qubits. And when you get to 3 nines of 4 nines fidelity, that's kind of like a measure, then you start approaching commercial applications, right? So yes. I think it's an amazing time, and it's an amazing time for healthcare and where it's going. And what would be the ideal reality for you? Because you're the worldwide lead for health and life sciences, Microsoft for startups. What would be the ideal sort of reality, let's say in 2 years' time, of your role and this program that you're leading?
So I think there are a couple of things that come to mind. I mean, we're looking for organizations that are really doing breakthrough things. And so I'm hoping that as this program's been around for about 4 years, I'm hoping as we continue to refine the program and work with some of these innovators, that we actually see them get to a massive scale where they're actually having a significant impact on how we deliver care. I mean, that's an ultimate goal, obviously. But I think we're also at the point where we will hopefully be not only looking for economies of scale as we provide healthcare, but also empowering patients. And when I think about some of the technologies, including generative AI, and some of the ways that we interact with other parts of the commerce system outside of healthcare, will we ever be in a position, and I hope it's not too far off, where patients have a much greater voice and understanding of their own journey and how to optimize it in connection with their providers, in connection with their pharmaceutical companies, in connection with the med device companies. All of this time, patients have been told, certain things and have operated in a certain way that is somewhat uninformed, because it's been so hard to understand your own conditions. It's been so hard to understand all the medical terms. But now we have this ability to translate that in a way that is understandable to me as a layperson, understandable to my mother who's 86. So when I think about how we all move healthcare in a positive direction, I think about increasing access in care deserts. I think about improving food in food deserts and nutrition. I think about people having a much better informed view of their own health and how to improve their health. And then I think about building stronger partnerships between the key players, clinicians, patients, pharmaceutical companies, med device companies, so that we are working together to improve care. And we're looking at value-based models, not fee-for-service. Because I think that type of pivot will help us all realize that healthy people are better people, and they are more productive, they are better members of society, and more contributing to society. So that's kind of the big vision I have.
So could we summarize that by saying, and maybe these are not the right terms, but I'm just kind of brainstorming with you. It's really a wellness program and a preventative care program and an improved just well-being program, right?
Absolutely. I think wellness is part of it. The problem that we have, especially in this country, is we have too many sick people. So we have to get them well first, and then we have to think of keeping them well. But yes, it's a transition from the preventative model from what we have now, which is break fix model.
Yeah, and you know, you have a background in things like Internet of Things, and you worked in that space of machine learning and AI as well with your partners, with the partners prior to joining Microsoft. But there's this, I mean, I wore a watch, and this watch has incredible capability, and the sensors are just getting better, right? And and some people are looking at glucose monitors because of all the kind of feedback it can give you in terms of improving your well-being. And so we as consumers have so much more access to data, and data that can be meaningful for us, so we can make micro adjustments. And of course, working with our care providers, so that, you know, we're always working in unison with our care providers. So you're talking about that as well, right? And maybe even on the immersive technologies, them being able to provide a better kind of feedback to you to improve your lifestyle so you can have a healthier future. Do you see the integration of that happening within, let's say, by 2030, or do you think it's going to be further out?
No, I do. I mean, I'm already starting to see, AR and VR in healthcare take center stage. So you think about everything from we've got a company in Pegasus called Realize Care that does VR for chronic pain management, anxiety, depression. So that stuff is here. It's not widely adopted yet, but we're hoping it will get there. But I do see this groundswell of desire for holistic wellness that takes the form of wearables, sensors, AR, VR devices, and a variety of, whether it's nudges from an app that says, "Hey, you haven't walked your 10,000 steps today," or it's a watch saying stress level, time to go, take a breath, or go do your app that helps you breathe, whatever. All of those things are here today, but I don't think there's enough incentives for individuals to adopt them, or for providers and payers to say, this is something that we're prescribing you, and if you do this, your insurance will cost less, or whatever it is. All that is going to come, I think, but absolutely, yes, things are going to change, hopefully rapidly, in the next 10 years, 6 years.
You know, I'm really intrigued. So you got this Microsoft for Startups program. So you're going back to that, you know, and people can apply, and they could get support, right? And then you have this Pegasus program, which is for those who are really scaling or have this capability of scaling to be a universal solution of some sort that you think, you know, people should double down on. Is there somewhere where we can see them? So they're like North Stars, and we could say, wow, that's incredible. Or we can, the broader community can support in some way, or
So the Pegasus portfolio is constantly moving, in that we constantly have folks being added to the portfolio and other people rolling off. We typically don't, go out full blown with who they are. But if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll get a good idea, because I'm always posting about the Pegasus startups in our portfolio when they achieve certain customers sales, or have achieved milestones with new funding, or participate in events with us and stuff like that. So anybody who wants to know who those Pegasus startups are, you're welcome to contact me, and I will share those with you. But follow me on LinkedIn, and you'll get a really good understanding of who's in there.
so that's an easy thing. Follow
Yep.
Sally on LinkedIn, right?
Absolutely.
And in fact, what you can do, the audience can do, is they can contribute. They can do likes and comments and reshares
That's right.
and so on, right?
Absolutely. I love that.
Okay, so I think this is just really remarkable. Now let's talk about, you're a book writer, right? Can you talk more
Yes.
about that?
Yes. So March of this year, I released my first business book called The Startup Protocol. And can I show a picture of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what had happened was I started seeing the same problems, same issues, same blind spots. Here it is. John Halamka from Mayo did the forward for me. But I kept seeing the same like blind spots from founders time and time again. And so what I did was I essentially wrote this book in hopes that people can avoid kind of these basic mistakes and move on to the bigger ones. No, but really kind of accelerate their growth. So there are 10 chapters, and it goes through from ideation all the way to grow. And the idea is that at each chapter, there's a story, and it's anonymous, about a startup gone bad, like the same mistake that I've seen over and over and over again, and then some ways to avoid that mistake and some recommendations. So one of the pieces of feedback I've gotten, and I'll quote it from the founder, Ravi, he said it's like a mentor in a book. And several of the founders that I work with were like, where was this book 4 years ago or 3 years ago when I was just starting my company? So it's gotten a little bit of good response so far, but it's really hopefully going to give some actual tangible actions that you can take. It's not very it's not high level. It gets really down in the weeds really quickly and points people to resources and makes recommendations on things like go to market, when to engage with an accelerator, when you should start looking at VC firms, and really some hopefully very tactical things that people can do to make sure that they're on the right path and building their digital health startup.
So that's a remarkable resource for any startup that wants to do this. And I can now see also the corporations, because they're not, they're trying to spin up innovation centers and maybe get that entrepreneurial side of them and launching these kind of programs. This will be useful for them as well as a guidepost, right?
Yeah, when I was writing it, I was thinking it would be useful by obviously startup founders, but also accelerators, entrepreneurial programs, folks like you mentioned who are spinning something out of an enterprise organization. The skills that you need to launch a health or life sciences startup is very different than when you're working in an enterprise like a large pharma or a large provider or even Microsoft. So hopefully it points out some of the things that you can do to make the journey a little bit easier.
So are you able to give a few tips from your book? Like, what are the, three most common mistakes or something like that? And what are the three things that maybe startup founders ignore that they don't realize they could do to grow faster or take advantage of opportunities better?
So one of my favorites is, and this is specific for health and life sciences, is make sure that your product development, regulatory, and go-to-market roadmaps are all in alignment. What I see time and time again is people developing products, and then I go, okay, what's your business model?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your regulatory pathway look like? And so they're so enamored with the technology that they've built, which is great. We want them psyched about it, but you've got to make sure that when that's built, you're ready to go to market and you have at least an understanding of the regulatory path that you have to take. And you have to also understand who's going to buy it, how are you going to sell it, and what's the price point? Like literally, is it a SaaS model? Is it per transaction? Is it per use of your AI model? All of those things. So that's usually my top piece of advice. The other thing that I think is really important is to look at any relationship with a potential funder or a potential accelerator as a marriage. And I think startups think that whatever accelerator or whatever VC organization is interested in them, they should just go along. When in fact, you need to understand as a founder what you want to get out of that relationship and make sure that's put in there front and center. For example, if you're looking at a corporate venture arm as a potential investor, is there a pathway to getting a pilot or a POC with that venture, with that corporation through the CVC? And if there isn't, that may not be the right place for you. And so looking at those relationships as they chose me, but I need to choose them. And I need to be fully bought into how they're going to operate and how they're going to help me and my needs is so very important. And I think it's another place where startups just default to whoever, says we'll fund you first.
So what I'm hearing is that you got to get out of this unidirectional mindset. It's got to be bidirectional, or what a friend of mine terms an omni-win. You got to make sure you win out of this as well, right? So it's not one-sided. And from a VC standpoint, make sure it's a strategic investment. They can help you. They can help you grow in a demonstrable way. Their networks are there where you can grow. You can grow your startup, right? And it's not just a financial investment because,
Yes, absolutely.
So that's remarkable. And I can see this really being a product of from when you were very young, right? And doing your computing science journey and together with marketing, and then working with this partner and technology and doing your own startups, and then also then getting involved with this Microsoft enterprise on the startup community and in the healthcare. But I can see all of the elements of your life being embodied into your work now with this book, which I'm going to recommend to everybody, The Startup Protocol, a guide for digital health startups to bypass pitfalls and adopt strategies that work, right? So you're not spinning your wheels, wasting time. You got it all encompassed in your book. So you got to
like
put up that book
180
cover
pages.
again.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick read. It's 180 pages, and I'm hoping that you'll underline and earmark. And also, it's available on Kindle. It's available through the publisher, which is Routledge, as well as on Amazon and in Kindle format on Amazon.
Well, I know we're down to our last few minutes. Do you have any final recommendations you want to give to the audience, or maybe there's something we missed and we didn't talk about that you want to bring up?
So, I think there are a couple of things. One is, and this goes back to the things that I see, the mistakes. Nobody's solution is unique. Whenever I hear that, it's like I turn off. So, but I do encourage startups to make sure that they follow people, whether they follow you, Stephen, or others that are in the industry that they feel are thought leaders in their particular field. So if you're looking at, if you're looking at molecules and you're doing digital biology, who are the leaders in that field from both from a company perspective as well as an individual perspective, and follow them and understand what they're doing and learn from what they're doing. I think you have to have a certain amount of gravitas to think you have the chutzpah to run a startup and to start a startup, especially in health and life sciences. But that doesn't mean you can't learn from others. So find those thought leaders on LinkedIn, on X if you're on X, and follow them and learn from them consistently. And then the other thing is find companies with adjacent solutions and look what they're doing. Because if they're larger than you and they're doing something related, maybe that's a future distribution channel for you or a future partner for you. And so I think the bottom line is make sure you are making the ecosystem work for you. There's so much out there on LinkedIn, and I get Google News fed to me every day. There's so much out there. Don't miss the opportunity to learn from others to accelerate your own growth.
It's interesting. I mean, I did a fireside with Kozla, and he spent a lot of time just reading and reading at the edge too, the things that are really at the boundary layers, right? So not just the commonplace, but the things that are at the edge, but doing the same things that you're mentioning as well, making sure adjacent layers, the things that can accelerate the areas that you think could be potential partners and more, right? So,
Right. So, I think about all the recent controversy about cybersecurity and healthcare. And I think about we have a few cybersecurity specific to healthcare in our portfolio. And I think to myself, it's a terrible thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. But when you can read about the Change Healthcare issue and come back with, oh, we fill that gap and here's how. These are the types of things that help a startup kind of formulate their strategy and formulate what they're doing in a meaningful way that is reflective of what the industry needs. Because that's the other thing. Make sure you're building something make sure you are building something that will solve a problem that people will pay you to solve. Because sometimes you build something and they're like, we're not interested in solving that problem.
yeah, and I guess this gets back to this idea of the investment readiness level that Steve Blank and his colleagues came up with. There's 7 or 9 levels, but it's got to be demonstrated validation. It's not just people saying, "Oh, I like it." It's
Right.
got to be measurable validation each step of the way. So I would say 3 primary takeaways. So make sure everybody, the audience, follow you. Right? Make sure that they sign up for the Microsoft Startups program, right? And the Microsoft Startup Founders Hub, right? Within that, and mine that to any way in any dimensions that you can. And also, everybody's got to get this book, The Startup Protocol: A Guide for Digital House Startups to Bypass Pitfalls and Adopt Strategies That Work. If there's 3 big takeaways, that would make success for the audience, right? It's an omni-win for everybody.
I hope so. I hope so. Stephen, thank you so much for this. It was lovely talking with you.
And thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights with my audience.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.